Dear Tracy and Kit, and to the rest of the Raymond family that I have not had the opportunity to meet. I don't know where to begin. I guess I will start by telling you the start of the story and how I got to meet Shawn. I was introduced to the case when my Lieutenant Bateman, told me that the Macomb County Sheriff's Office had an unidentified skull in their possession and that he was going to extend my talents to them. This was last July. I had just had the training for a three-dimensional skull reconstruction in February of 2003, so this was new stuff for me. Originally, the Sheriff's Department had brought the skull to the crime lab in Sterling Heights and had one of the forensic scientists that was aware of my training and abilities had told him that they should have me reconstruct the face. About 2 weeks later, I received a call from the Sheriff's Department asking for me to take the case, and I accepted. I got the skull in a property box and took it to the anthropology lab at Michigan State University. Several days later, Dr. Todd Fenton and I examined the skull and determined it was from a white male, aged 18 to 35 years old, based on the dentition and suture structures, and that this person had orthodontic care in his lifetime. There really wasn't much there. No hair sample, no clothing or jewelry, and not only was it missing its mandible, but it was missing all of its front teeth. Now, I know that this person had nice teeth in life. You could see how straight the root patterns were. They had just dropped out due to the skull being so old and had never been recovered, even though the Sheriff's Department had done a grid search in the area that they had found the skull in. Dr. Fenton and I discussed the missing mandible and the complications it brought doing a 3D sculpture. I was going to have to either make a mandible out of clay or we would have to borrow a specimen from another skull. We went through the boxes of donated skeletons before we found a mandible from a man that's family had donated his remains to MSU for study. I left the skull with Dr. Fenton to do some x-rays and had the skull cleaned of any mud and roots that had been wedged in the skull from being out in the elements. When I got it back, it was ready to begin the reconstruction. My husband at that time had made me a first-class skull stand, which he's still very proud of. And I set the skull with its borrowed mandible on this and made all the measurements I needed from the skull and cut tissue depth markers for a white male and glued them on the appropriate landmarks on that skull. I started putting the clay on the skull on 10/23/03, a day after my 26th birthday. I worked on it on and off for several months. At that time, I was working the midnight shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The reconstruction often took the back burner to me working the road and handling drunk driving complaints. Finally, this past March, I was bumped to the day shift, and I had more time to commit to the sculpture. As I went along with the troops in my post, it became more and more interested in the case. The sculpture eventually got nicknamed Harry, and he took on a real personality around the post. I don't know who to credit with dubbing him that, but I would get stopped by my guys I work with, and they would ask me how Harry was doing. In a way, giving him a name made it seem more personal to me. It gave this unknown person that I was putting so much dedicated time and energy to a bit of character. As the sculpture neared completion, I really started thinking, was this really going to go anywhere? This is such an old case. Was I really good enough? Did I do everything right? I took a long, hard look at him, Harry, and thought to myself, you are someone's son. You are a young, good-looking guy. Somebody knows you're missing. I completed the reconstruction on March 22nd. We planned a press conference on the 24th to get this out to the public and in hopes that somebody would recognize this face. 6 days later, I got that call. I had just gotten in my patrol car and checked in with dispatch. I immediately got a call on the radio from a voice I recognize as Sergeant Tim Brown, who is an accident reconstructionist in the 2nd District. He asked me to meet him on info into Shawn Raymond from Clay Township. He had been missing since the 80s. He went on and gave me the name of one of the officers that worked the case way back when. I thanked Tim for the tip and went on with my patrol activities. Meanwhile, I was thinking, from the early 80s, that is kind of a long shot for my case since it was found in 1992. But I immediately planned on looking into the matter. I called a contact I had with the FBI, an agent that I knew was certified as a dentist before he was in the agency. I made a meeting with him that following day to take a look at this case for me. I then called Sergeant Rummel from the Clay Township Police Department and asked to see Shawn's missing persons file. He seemed to be surprised to hear that I had a tip from Tim Brown, but agreed to have it ready for me in the morning. I went to the Clay Township Police Department at about 9 a.m. the following morning. This was on March 31st, and for the first time I opened Shawn's missing persons file. It was about 1.5 inches thick and filled with scraps of paper and notes and phone numbers scribbled on them. And then I saw the photo. It was of a young 18-year-old something guy. I was instantly struck on the fact that he was a really good-looking guy. This was his senior photo. I dug past the photos and missing person flyers and found what I was looking for. The written dental charts, filled out by Shawn's dentist after he was reported missing in 1983. I thanked the dispatcher and left with those dental records and started for the FBI office in Mount Clemens. When I got there, I presented Special Agent Chris Allen with all that I had. The written dental charts from Shawn's missing persons file and the digital photos I had of the skull's dentition. Nothing to do with a positive ID, but enough to tell me this was going to be the right person. Chris took several long looks at the dental charts and filled out one of his own on what he could see from the skull. When he was done, the charts were identical. Both Shawn and the skull had fillings in the same teeth, both had partially impacted wisdom teeth, and both had their first bicuspids extracted at some point in life and had orthodontics to fill in the gaps. I could not believe my eyes. Neither could Chris. He told me he could not exclude Shawn as my victim, but this wasn't enough. The perfectionist that I am had to go and get another opinion before I could go home that day. Called up my dentist, Dr. Ronald Konopka, in St. Clair Shores and asked if I could drop by to show him something. 10 minutes later, I was in his office with the same files. He, too, could not exclude Shawn from being the skull. I called the Clay Township Police again and asked that they contact Shawn's last known dentist to get his x-rays. Luckily, Shawn's orthodontist still had his x-rays and released them to us. At approximately 8:30 a.m., they were on my desk. I immediately took out the panoramic films from the dentist and stuck them against my window. I then took out the 2 small bite wing x-rays that I had taken at the anthropology lab back in August. I arranged them so I was looking at the same sides and the same teeth. That was it. I started to shake. They were an exact match. At that point, I knew it was Shawn. There was not an ounce of doubt in my mind it was him. I waited anxiously until 9:15 and carefully set the sculpture in a box of shredded paper to soften the ride, and I started towards Port Huron. On the way, it went over in my mind, who was I going to call first? I actually made a list of people I had to notify immediately. On the top of the list was Sergeant Rummel of the Clay Township Police. He was the one that was going to have to notify the next of kin. The odontologist, Dr. McKenzie, wrote up a letter stating that the skull and Shawn's x-rays from his orthodontist were one and the same person. It really didn't hit me until I had shaken hands with him and thanked him for his time, and I finally sat down in my car. That was when it hit me and I cried. I sat in my patrol car in a parking lot in Port Huron in full uniform and cried with my head against the steering wheel. I cried for all the work I had done. I cried for the anticipation. Most of all, I cried for Shawn's family, knowing that Mrs. Shirley Raymond was going to find out that her son had been dead all these years. I knew that she had to have some hope, even after all these years, and this was going to be a huge blow. And the rest is history. It's been a blur of interviews, phone calls, and requests from the media, and my focus has now been on why was Shawn in the Clinton River. Luckily, this case has drawn so much media attention. That will be one crucial thing that gets this case out there. The more people see it on the news and start talking about it, the better chance we have of somebody coming forward with that information. Because somebody out there has been holding on to a lot of guilt. And hopefully, time will be on our side and they will come forward. I hope this will help to answer any questions you had, or maybe it will just bring a little more closure. I truly don't believe you will ever get the full amount of closure that you need until you get justice. And I will do everything in my power to get that for Shawn. God bless your family in this hard time. Sarah.